My wife and I have been together for 5 years, married for 4. She had a bad marriage before me and had a child. I had no problem stepping up to the plate to help her raise her child. The father wants nothing to do with my wife or his kid. To the point, I had 2 friends that I've had since I was 16. They were both female and I had dated one of them for 4 years, but we split up agreeing that we made better friends than an actual couple. This never happens in real life apparently. She's always been my go for advice, and I made our friendship 100% transparent for my wife when we first met, and never did anything. Out of habit, my friend and I still said we loved each other, but more of a platonic love. We both loved our current partners and never wanted anything between each other. However, after a few years this took a toll on my wife and she asked me to stop telling her that I loved her. So I explained this to my friend and she said she understood and would have no problem doing so. Another month or so I still have 100% transparency with my wife as to make her feel comfortable. I got deployed and my friend had just had her baby and asked me if I wanted to FaceTime to see her. I said yes, naturally happy for her and her husband. After a nice chat and meeting her new son, I got a call from my wife a few days later asking if I had talked to her KN FaceTime. I told her that I had and why, also telling her what we had discussed. My wife then didn't talk to me the rest of my deployment. When I got home I explained that I was sorry it hurt her feelings and wanted to make things better. She told me to never talk to her again. I tried to explain that it was just a friendship and that neither of us wanted a relationship. My wife took it upon herself to call her and tell her that if she didn't stop talking to me forever that she would tell my friend's husband that we were having an affair. She did not tell me any of this. I quickly noticed she had blocked me on everything, including my number. I had no idea what happened, so I confronted my wife and she told me that she was certain I was cheating on her, and that my friend and I were having an affair. She then told me that she had called her and only asked her to not talk to me anymore. I was slightly upset but stood by her decision and held no grudge. I feel like this event led to the breakdown of everything. She started to have no trust in anything I did, constantly going through my phone, and she would constantly lock her phone, or lock herself in the bathroom talking to someone on the phone. She started blaming her job for her unhappiness. I told her that I could pull extra hours at work if she wanted to quit to find a new one. She quickly quit her job and made no attempt to find work again. I was enlisted at the time. She said she hated that I was gone all the time, so I offered to go reserves to be with her more. She said that would fix it. So I got a civilian job that paid decent, but we had to move. The job is stressful and I'm not very fond of being a civilian. She has now come to the conclusion that I need to get out of the military and quit my civilian job, and we to move again, and that's the only way she'll be happy. I feel like I've given up everything for her to be happy. I'm trying to show her the logic that there is no way for us to survive if neither of us works. I love my wife and don't want a divorce, but I feel like she will never be happy and I'm not sure how to fix it. She blames everything on me and says that I'd be happier with someone else, or says she's leaving again. I'm currently deployed again, and the last week I was home she wouldn't talk to me or spend time with me and our daughter. She would lock herself in the bedroom all day. Then at night she would call me names and say I don't care about her and I never spend time with her. I am a hiring manager at a tech company and I was hiring for summer internships a little while ago. We had a guy, about 19 years old, applying for a summer internship between his freshman and sophomore years of college. It was a virtual interview over Zoom because of COVID. A minute or two in, when I was introducing myself, his mom came in and introduced herself and started talking about her son's work ethic. I thought it was a little strange. I said something polite about wanting to hear from him. She just didn't get the hint and kept coming into camera frame during the interview and interrupting her son to answer questions for him. I asked a few technical questions which he seemed to answer well and then cut the interview fairly short. I thought that was all over and done with until I'd gotten an email from a woman, a month later, asking about her son's application. She seemed offended he hadn't gotten an acceptance or rejection. It bothered me. I felt bad for the kid, honestly. Way back when I was a teenager, my mom used to pull the same shit. But luckily she only did that when I was 15 and working for a day camp. Not when I was an adult applying for engineering jobs. but I felt like this poor kid was getting his chances ruined because his mom wasn't giving him the chance to apply on his own. I sent an email back saying I was not at liberty to send information about an application to anybody but the applicant. I also asked HR to send an email to the kid saying sorry, but we were not making him an offer. It is something we usually do, but his rejection email must have slipped through the cracks with all the COVID craziness. Anyway, after we sent that, I got a phone call from his mom. She had a forwarded copy of the email, and she was demanding answers. I said that I could not comment on the guy's performance in the interview to her as she was not the applicant. If he wanted to reach out to me, I was happy to give him some feedback. However, I could say that regardless of his performance, her presence in the interview took him out of consideration for the position. We were looking for an independent and self-driven person for the position, and for that reason, it is important to see an applicant speak for themselves, follow up themselves, etc. I also said that, as a piece of advice, every hiring manager I've met in my career who sees someone other than the applicant answering questions during an interview, following up on the applicant's behalf, etc., would also put their resume in the "do not hire" pile. Since, while the applicant may be skilled and motivated, they need the ability to demonstrate those traits themselves. She blew up at me over that, kinda cussing me out to the point where I hung up. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb, and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me he had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where, I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated. My boyfriend Steve and I have been dating for over 1.5 years. I met him in one of my upper-level classes 2 years ago. At the time he was finishing up his degree, before moving on and working on his master's. Since we started talking, seeing each other, and dating casually, I really loved our entire relationship. Steve and I had a lot of similar interests, which included traveling. We did a small trip to South America a couple months ago for a few weeks, Peru and Chile. We had an amazing time. It was once we got back from our trip that I saw our relationship in a whole different way. We traveled well together, and bonded in a new way. I knew I was in a great relationship. I thought we had a great relationship, until I got some news a few days ago. 3 days ago, I went over to drop a MacBook charger over at my best friend's house, Chenille. Chenille and I have been best friends since we were in high school from the age of 16 years old. I have always considered her to be my number one, and closest person in my life. I have noticed that the past 6 months we haven't hung out in the same capacity that we usually have. Both of us have been busy with our lives, school, work, relationships, etc. But I kinda got the feeling after this past year of university around April that she was starting to move away. She had a bad with her ex that lasted under a year. He cheated on her with a coworker, and the rest is history. They broke officially around the end of January. As I went over to drop off her extra charger that she borrowed, I talked with her mom for a bit. Chanel ended up getting called in to pick up an extra serving shift at the restaurant she has worked at during her degree. Her mom wanted to talk to me about a few things. I was puzzled. Chanel's mom was always really outgoing and funny. We had known each other for over 8 years at least. But she wanted to have a serious talk. Chanel's mom, Karen, went on to tell me that she saw Steve and Chanel sneak around the back of the house about a month or so ago. Karen went on to explain that she noticed this happening 2 other times. At first, she thought we were all hanging out. But Karen told me that she got a weird gut feeling on this situation. She told me that I should talk to Steve and Chanel ASAP. Steve and I were supposed to go out for dinner last night. He picked me up, and off we went. I felt really bad and humiliated the entire time we were out. We ate dinner, had a couple drinks, but we didn't talk much. Steve kept asking me all night what was the matter. I told him nothing. Finally, when we got back to my place, we sat in my room and I asked him and told him what Chanel's mom, Karen, is told me. He didn't answer. In fact, he went pale white. That gave me the answer I needed. I broke down and Steve tried to comfort me. I didn't want him touching me. I didn't even want to hear it. I told him to leave, but I basically had to force him to leave. I tried calling Chanel and texted her that I needed to talk to her. I got no response. Not one. Basically, 2 of the closest people I have had in my life betrayed me. This is so terrible and I feel so bad. I have like no one right now.